Around 2015, Apple introduced a major redesign to all MacBook keyboards. This change was the new Butterfly keyboard, which replaced the traditional scissor switch design used in earlier models. The Butterfly system was supposed to provide a more stable and precise typing experience with less key wobble and noticeably thinner keys. This allowed Apple to slim down the MacBook and later MacBook Pro models. However, shortly after its release, users reported keys just failing to register, or producing repeated characters, or feeling stuck and unresponsive. The cause of these problems was the Butterfly keyboard's extremely tight design, with almost no internal space. Even small particles like dust or crumbs could interfere with the key's movement, so in actual use this meant that normal everyday conditions would cause keys to malfunction. Pretty crazy for an Apple product. It didn't help that the keyboard was designed to be integrated into the top case of the laptop, meaning that repairing a single faulty key often required replacing the entire assembly, including the battery. So unless you had Apple Care, you'd be paying tons of money to fix a keyboard that had like a speck of dust in it or whatever. Apple for some reason continued shipping multiple generations with this design, only making minor adjustments such as adding a silicone membrane in later models. Only after mounting criticism and legal pressure, Apple introduced a repair program and by 2019, returned to the scissor switch keyboard design. In 2017, Apple unveiled AirPower alongside the iPhone X, presenting it as this breakthrough in wireless charging. It was a flat charging mat that would wirelessly power multiple devices placed anywhere on its surface. To achieve this, AirPower needed a complex internal design made up of many overlapping charging coils. The idea was that the system would intelligently detect device placement and activate the appropriate coils. However, there was a major technical challenge, as with multiple coils operating in close proximity, the device generated significant heat and interference. Managing which coils were active at any given time was far more difficult than Apple actually expected, and internal prototypes reportedly kept struggling with overheating and overall inconsistent performance. To remind you again, this was after Apple had publicly announced and promoted the product live on stage. People waited for months, and there was some hype surrounding this charger, until in 2019 Apple officially cancelled AirPower, stating that it could not meet the company's standards. So this became a very notable event because it broke from Apple's typical pattern of only announcing products close to release, making AirPower basically the only case where a highly publicized product failed to ship at all. In late 2016, Apple released an update to iOS 10, which was a system designed to manage aging batteries in older iPhones. This change affected models like the iPhone 6, 6S, and SE, and it worked by dynamically reducing CPU performance when a battery could no longer deliver consistent peak power. The reasoning behind this was that as lithium-ion batteries degrade over time, they become less capable of handling sudden power demands, which could lead to device shutdowns. And to prevent this, iOS began limiting performance during peak usage to keep the phone stable. The issue, however, was that this behavior was not clearly communicated at all. We began noticing that our phones felt slower after updates, not in some one-off ways, but in big ones like when apps opened more slowly or scrolling became less responsive. From there, a conspiracy of planned obsolescence started, saying that Apple is doing this to force people to keep buying new models. And in 2017, users ran benchmark tests and discovered a pretty damning consistency, that devices with the great batteries showed significant reduced performance compared to identical models with healthier batteries. This proved the conspiracy and led to global media coverage and multiple lawsuits. Apple eventually confirmed the behavior and added a battery health feature and let users disable this performance management, but some still believe this was a cover-up and Apple really was trying to make older phones obsolete. Starting around 2019, Apple began implementing a system known as parts pairing across newer iPhones, linking key components directly to the device's logic board at a software level. This affected parts like the display, battery, camera, and Face ID module. Each of these components carries a unique identifier, and when installed, the system checks whether that part is officially recognized and calibrated for that specific device. This meant that you now couldn't get third-party replacements outside of Apple's authorized repair system. Even if the part itself is genuine, Apple would tell you something like unable to verify if this iPhone has a genuine Apple battery, which I believe adds limitations to the actual device, like how replacing a Face ID module can result in the feature being permanently disabled, even if the hardware itself is perfectly normal. Apple said this was to prevent stealing iPhones for parts, but even authentic components can trigger these restrictions if they haven't been paired using Apple's internal calibration tools. This made independent repairs significantly more difficult and more expensive, since users now had to go to Apple stores for fixes, which, as we all know, love to just take money. Over time, Apple did introduce a self-service repair program which offered access to official parts and tools, but this process remains complex and still requires system-level validation. I remember Siri used to be seen as this breakthrough in voice interaction and felt ahead of its time. In this era, Siri handled basic tasks like setting reminders, sending texts, and answering questions in a way that felt very futuristic, and I think that gave her a very high bar. However, over the following decade, the visible progress of Siri slowed significantly, especially as competitors rapidly improved. By early 2020s, people began began noticing that Siri's capabilities were largely unchanged. One of the most common frustrations was its difficulty with context. While it could handle single commands, follow-up requests would often fail. Instead of executing more complex actions, Siri instead decided to show web search results rather than direct assistance, which is the whole point of Siri. I looked into why a company like Apple allows this, and as it turns out, they've prioritized processing data on device and limiting large-scale data collection for security reasons. But of course, this restricts the amount of data available to train and improve Siri's AI. Additionally, Siri's entire architecture dates back to earlier generations of AI, making it way harder to evolve compared to the newer, more context-aware models. I think Siri sucked for a while now, but now with the rise of modern AI, which reset user expectation around what AI should do, it's just so obviously useless. You'd think that would be the bottom, but Apple added a ChatGPT integration to Siri and claimed that it will act like a real AI now, only for that to just not be the case, which is genuinely abysmal, and I wonder if Siri could find a way to get even worse from here. In iOS 17, Apple introduced a major overhaul to the iPhone keyboard based around a new AI-driven autocorrect. The older autocorrect was largely dictionary-based and couldn't understand context, predict full words, and suggest entire phrases as users type. So on paper, AI would allow for all of that and shoot way past the level of quality of the old autocorrect. There were definitely some cool new abilities here and there, but a lot of basic behavior just stopped working. You could have a correctly typed word that just gets replaced for some reason, or the autocorrect would attempt to rewrite parts of sentences based on its own predictions. Basically, it stopped fixing simple typos and tried to take over more, almost fighting the user rather than fixing their mistakes. Just very inconsistent behavior overall, and I think it's due to Apple being too forward with AI and forgetting that you still need a hard-coded dictionary autocorrect, because now it feels the AI just decides whether to fix your typo or give you some stupid BS that doesn't even make sense. iOS 18 is literally known for its major redesign of the Photos app, which fundamentally changed how users navigated and organized their images. In previous versions, the app followed a consistent and familiar structure with clear tabs along the bottom, and has been doing so for years at this point with no seeming issues. In iOS 18, that was removed and replaced with a single, vertically scrolling interface. Instead of navigating through tabs, everything is now stacked into one continuous page. The photo library sits alongside sections like recent days, pinned collections, albums, people and pets, and memories, all arranged in this feed-like layout. I think even if this change is technically better, any change that affects muscle memory will always end up disliked. Actions that once took a single tap, such as opening albums, now require scrolling through the interface to locate the correct section. Another issue was the new smart content. Sections like memories and featured photos are the first thing you see when you open Photos, which is stupid for something meant to be a straightforward photo manager. And in order to do this, essential buttons like albums are less immediately visible. In 2024, Apple introduced Apple Intelligence and hyped it up as this huge integrated AI experience across iOS, macOS, and iPadOS. This would be a system-wide layer embedded into core apps and especially Siri. And on stage, Apple demonstrated a Siri that actually looked very cool for a change, one that could understand personal context, analyze what's on your screen, and perform multi-step actions across apps. So obviously that, combined with Apple integrating the latest big tech into their phones, got an insane amount of engagement, especially with Apple promoting Apple Intelligence as their iPhone 16 main feature. But then iOS 18 rolled around and we got nothing. I mean, we got some writing tools, I think, but the actual cool features shown on stage weren't here at all. Apple had marketed a fundamentally smarter assistant as a reason to buy the newer phone, yet we were still interacting with a version of Siri that behaved exactly as before. It took Apple some extra time to say that many of these advanced capabilities were delayed, with some pushed into 2026 and gave some excuse. And as of 2026, Siri still sucks, and I'm pretty sure we haven't even gotten most of the cool Apple Intelligence features we were promised. While working on this video, it turns out some features actually came out on MacBook, but were turned off by default, and I don't remember a single prompt that told me of their existence. Maybe I missed something and it's on me, but it's just a very sloppy implementation overall, especially on iPhones, which could have gotten a Siri that could control parts of the phone and access apps. Definitely let me know what you think of these Apple screw-ups overall. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and hype the video, as it does a surprising lot for newer channels, and thank you for watching.